All right. Well, thanks for making time. It sounds like you had a lot going on today.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. It's just been a crazy week. I don't know if you know about all the flight issues that happened, all this IT stuff that went on last week, some cybersecurity issues. So I had flights canceled and we're trying to catch up on stuff. So I had a nice 12-hour drive last minute from Michigan because the flight was canceled and then just
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it was weird.
But you're back at the home base now.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Just getting everything back in order.
Nice. Yeah, it's been a little hectic for me too. I've had some unexpected overtime. I'm glad for the overtime pay, but
Sure.
I've been going in there before and after hours. I work at the courthouses here in Tallahassee, and
Okay.
fire alarms are going off and air handler units are blowing through their belts, and we got to crawl in there,
Yeah,
before
yeah,
the
yeah.
judges get in and get upset because they're going to sweat in their robes if it's too hot because it's
Right.
not summer. But yeah, so I don't think I've been quite as stretched thin as you, but I can certainly appreciate.
Sure, sure. You make it work.
That's right. Well, I'm really glad to have you, Dave, host of a Brains and Gains podcast. Obviously, very prolific podcaster. You've been in the game for a while. Big YouTube presence. More recent advocate of the home gym. You
Yeah.
kind of have this slow transition, it seems like, into fully committing to the home gym. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. What was, you think, the moment where you decided it's just silly for me to be driving out here once or twice a week to use this gym membership?
I mean, I think gyms are great. It's just, I mean, I've always wanted a home gym. I finally have a house that has the room for it. I was in a townhouse before and I had some stuff. Basically, when COVID hit, I bought some stuff for my like adjustable dumbbells and a pull-up bar. But throughout high school, I mean, I bought a squat rack for my basement, had an awesome deal. It was like $100 off Craigslist for, I mean, it was like a crappy squat rack, but still, squat rack, barbell, 300 and some pounds of weights all for $100. That was the best purchase I've ever had. And then obviously in college and dental school and all that, you're just working out at a university gym, so it's convenient. But now it's just really nice to like, for example, today I woke up at 3:30 and sometimes if I just can't really sleep, I'm like, well, I'm going to work out today. Let's just kind of get it out of the way. And then, we discussed I had some other stuff I had to handle. So in that situation, I can just go down to my basement and get it done. Whereas obviously, if it was a gym, maybe at the earliest they're going to open up at 5 or 6. So it just allows that flexibility. If it's super late, I come home late and I want to do a 9 p.m. workout, I can do that as well. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing what a difference too. I mean, regardless of, I mean, even if you have a 24-hour access situation, not having to drive 15 minutes. I mean, 15 minutes both ways, that's an extra half an hour that you're tacking on,
Yeah.
especially going, it's kind of pushed late. It makes a huge difference just be able to walk down the steps and have it right there.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing to me the people who drive over 30 minutes sometimes to a gym and they're working out 4 or 5 days a week. It's just like that's just so much time driving to and from some place. But I mean, I do know some people, it's like that's just kind of, they don't have that much going on in their lives. And it's just there's a social hour there and it's just a, big part of it. My brother used to do that. He would drive like 45 minutes to this gym. And I just couldn't believe it. I've always been relatively close. So,
Yeah, my situation's really good right now. I'm broadcasting out of my 500 square foot apartment
okay.
there with my cat and my fiance, but a block from here is a powerlifting gym. Uh, I'm buddies with the owner and I have my own key. So
Nice. Okay.
it's basically a home gym. I get a
That's
little
great.
walk over there and yeah. But it spoiled me to have like a competition level powerlifting equipment,
Oh yeah, yeah.
plates and like a leak or not a leako, but like the TSS racks and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't need to start acquiring equipment yet, but
Yeah.
definitely in my future once we settle into a house, and I'd love to have that set up.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, if somebody is competing in powerlifting, you can certainly still, of course, do the big three in like a standard gym. I guess, like if somebody was like, hey, I'm going to be an IFBB pro, can you do everything you want in your basement? I mean, I guess it depends on how big your basement is and what you want to have there. But I think for most people, you can really do plenty if you have a reasonable surface area or like a square footage.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how it becomes sort of a Tetris problem to get the equipment in there that you want.
Yeah.
I was listening to you talking with basement bodybuilding. He was talking about like disassembling the squat rack and having
Yeah.
to piece it together himself. Or I mean, not the Smith machine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, down the stairs and
Yeah. I'm trying to think about that now because we're looking at getting, like, you know what an arc trainer is, the cardio equipment.
yeah,
And we're looking it up. I mean, it comes assembled. It's like 400 pounds. It's awkward, and I mean, I literally don't know if we could do it because I'm just like, how would we even get this awkward 400 pounds down a turn staircase? Unless we disassembled it and reassembled it. I don't know. So you got to think about that. But yeah, just different probably issues and if you're like a gym owner, for example, and everything's first floor and you're just kind of walking in there and you got double doors, obviously very different.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
What is the thing that you covet the most right now that you don't have in there, but you want?
it's a good question. I There's really not a lot. I mean, I like hammer strength machines are cool, but there's really just not a lot that I would be doing on a regular basis that I can't do because even when I had access to a gym, I was used to doing, like, for example, in high school, I worked out at home and then I went to college, but I knew that I would come home for, let's say, summer or vacations or, whatever. And so I would try to keep my workouts relatively consistent. So even when I had access to a bunch of different equipment, I was still doing basic free weight exercises. And so I never really changed it too much to like where it's like all machine based. If anything, my training now is more machine based than it's ever been. And I'm doing like my chest exercise. I'm doing like a cable press around, like with Kasim Hansen has kind of popularized that, and a decline weighted push up. I'm doing a lot of like rowing and like cable rowing, I should say, lat pull downs and things. So like I pretty much have everything I want at this point. Maybe stuff will get added. Like right now, my leg extension and leg curl is one of those ones that's part of a bench. If you've seen those, like it's at the end of a bench, but it's actually a pretty quality one. Like I've had really low quality ones, and this one's pretty legit. But like a more legitimate leg curl, leg extension would be nice. But yeah, I'm really not wanting for much at this point.
That's fortunate. Yeah, I think that as I've also progressed through my kind of training history, I've realized I've pared down what I feel like I need, uh,
Mm,
and certainly it helps. Sam Shethar is coaching me now, and he's done a lot of the paring down himself.
mm,
Let's pull out a lot of this fluff that you had in there, set wise and just exercise variation wise.
yeah.
It was, I mean, your podcast with basement bodybuilding really brought up a lot of things that I was kind of arriving at, independently at the same time through
Mm,
the guidance of Sam. You know, the two sets of a preacher curl, and two sets of like a Bayesian curl. Um, I get it, man. 2 years ago, I was not 2 years ago, probably 4 years ago, I was full on like 30 sets per week, volume is king,
oh,
right?
really?
Yeah, and I was just spamming the hell out of my arms, out
Yeah.
of just arms and delts. And now I'm doing, two sets of dumbbell preacher curls, two sets of a Bayesian curl. That's my bicep work. And I think that that gets at something that I've heard you discuss a lot, which is uh there has to be a balance between the extremes of like full on logbook bro. We're progressing weight every week, and I'm just going to keep adding sets until it takes me an hour and a half to finish my bicep volume, right? Like
Right, right.
that's not reasonable for either extreme. And when people do those super high sets, it's usually for a finite period of time,
Sure.
before they get hurt or they just get sick of it. That's what happened to me. I got sick of it. I just didn't want to, I didn't care enough about growing my biceps to keep spending that long doing biceps.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable for somebody, like for example, somebody who's doing a logbook. I mean, because that's like, Max OT and Mike Menser and DC training and all of that. They are relatively lower volume routines that have built some really incredible physiques. On the high volume, I think you tend to see more people who do the kind of pump and fluff workouts with high volume and they're just kind of going in. But there's plenty of evidence for high volume training. I just think regardless of which one you pick, you have to have a structure to it. And when you just look in the real world, it was such a who was it who first kind of popularized this? But the general idea being like, hey, well, you can't add weight forever, so you got to add volume, which was such a weird argument to me because you can add weight a lot more than you can just add volume. I mean, really, like if you're at 10 sets, I mean, sure, you could go to 20, but I mean, you're probably not really ever going to be doing 30 sets per body part for every body part long term. But you can take your bench press from 135 up to 185 up to repping 315. I mean, I think there's more potential for there. But the reality is, whatever method of progression you choose, there's going to be limitations, right? And even if you take steroids, there's still going to be limitations eventually. So no method is going to just keep going. It's just about adding stimulus. But I do favor the concept of progressive overload with weights for moderate sets and moderate reps because, again, like not that this endpoint tells you how to get there, but if you look around, you can find many, many, many people who are doing 30 sets of chest, for example, per week who have small chests. There's nobody who does 315 for 10 on bench that has a tiny chest or 120-pound dumbbells for 10, let's call it. There's nobody who does that. Now, again, just saying that doesn't mean low volume is the answer to get there. But when I focus on what outcomes I'm looking for, my thought is what is the routine set up to get to that point, not how can I just progress volume for the sake of progressing volume.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean the other end of that, it's easy maybe for someone who's listening on YouTube to misinterpret that and think that rather than being the proxy for growth, uh increases in strength are the actual mechanism of growth, which okay, yeah, they are, you more mechanical tension that's going to stimulate more growth. But I think a lot of people fall into the trap of sort of disregarding consistency in their form to just try to add 5 pounds, and it's like if
Sure.
you're squatting a little higher this week than last week to add those 5 pounds, I don't know if that's a better stimulus if you're interested in growing your quads. But and not to discount it at all, I totally agree with that perspective, of ultimately you got to get pretty strong, if you want to see significant, or you got to improve your strength a decent amount if you want to see growth, right? But I do think that many early intermediates might fall into the trap of not being consistent with their execution, and I think that's as
Sure.
true of compound movements as it is of isolation movements. I mean, there's such a big difference between cutting your preacher curl an inch from like lockout
Oh
and
yeah.
actually taking it into that end range.
Yeah, yeah. All of what I said is assuming that somebody has quality form, consistent form. You can see very dramatic differences in quote unquote strength levels or really performance by just changing your form.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are you at with your like weekly volume for muscle groups? My sense is you've kind of been on maintenance for your lower body.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good sense. It's basically been 6 to 12 sets per body part for really years. I will occasionally just kind of take a muscle group and say, hey, or even a specific lift and say, hey, like I was focusing on overhead press for a while. I wanted to get to 225. And so I was like, okay, so, I'm doing this 3 or 4 times a week. But I'm trying to think the last muscle group that I really specialized in. And, I was doing a little bit more back for a while, but for the most part, almost everything is 6 to 12 sets. And those are anywhere between 0 to 2 RER. When I've added volume, I can't say I've seen a whole lot. I've done a number of specialization phases. I've seen it be helpful for strength, but I've never really been like, wow, this specialization phase really just dramatically changed the size of the muscle group.
Yeah, and it seems to me that, let's say you get 60% of your maximum growth from that first hard set, maybe 70%.
Yeah.
And then the second set, you're maybe getting 30%. The third set, you're getting 8%. And then if you add a fourth set, that's like 1.5,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's approaching an asymptote of nothing,
Sure.
essentially. So, and it's like, do you even notice the gains of that fifth set? And is that worth it to you? I mean, maybe over a career, if you're an IFBB pro again, who's utilizing exogenous kind of substances, like maybe that adds up over 10 years. But
Yeah.
if you're an average trainee, I don't know, especially a natural trainee, I don't know that you're going to see much of a change from that fifth set.
Yeah, and even that, I would caution people about that idea because it's very easy to say, hey, you might not be as serious as I am, but if you want that 1 or 2%, and then they extrapolate that, and yeah, but 1 to 2% per year over 10 years, that's a huge difference. And that's just not reality. It's like the people who say, well, if you just cut one soda out of your diet per day, you lose 30 pounds of fat in a year. And it's like you won't because your body is going to adapt to that. And so it's just a ridiculous to extrapolate in this example of the calories. I mean, it's so ridiculous. And I see this push with people with supplements as well. I mean, I have to credit Lane Norton for no longer selling branched chain amino acids, but one of the things I know he and other people would say at the time was like, well, if you're just your casual lifter, you don't need to really take this. But if you really want to be the best you can be and you want that extra 1 to 2%, and what are you doing there? You are priming people to say, oh, well, I'm not a weekend warrior. I do want the best and I want that 1%. That's what makes me serious. And so I'm going to do 3 times the volume and I'm going to take all these extra supplements. And the reality is, I mean, even let's not even get into the whole like, I mean, we can later if you want, but like, the fact that like genetics and all that stuff is obviously going to be a huge factor there. But even among, like, let's say like twins or triplets, the reality is just because a 12-week study on beginners shows that there was a slight change with slightly more volume doesn't mean that that is going to continue and extrapolate. And now it's like, oh, well, it was, 1% and then another 1% the following year and another 1%. It could just level off and there could be literally no difference. So I just caution people against that idea because I think it pegs people who are not doing that as if they're not serious. And it may just be that they've made a logical decision that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they're just rational.
Right, right.
And it also amazes me that so many of the people who are going to buy the BCAAs and oftentimes leave them on the counter of the gym where I attend, at least for no,
Hmm.
with like a half finished Gatorade that costs them $3, which is
All
just
right.
or they put it on the hyperextension and it's
Yeah.
like reverse hyperextension. It's like, man, this is not a table. But anyway, those people who are buying those supplements for the 1 or 2% are also up on Instagram 3 hours later than they should be and
Right, right, right.
diminishing their sleep quality, not tracking their protein, and skipping out on these easy changes, that don't cost you a GNC Pro membership.
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, most people are not doing everything. And I know some people who do have the mindset like until you have everything else dialed in perfectly, you shouldn't even worry about XYZ thing. I don't, that's not my reason for not recommending those things. It's more just the fact that like if I think it works, like let's just say, I want to say there's mixed evidence on creatine in that, some people really don't believe it does a lot. Like I personally don't notice anything when I take it, but I take it because there are so many studies on its benefits. But let's just say that creatine was guaranteed to add 5 pounds of lean body mass over, whatever time period. I wouldn't tell somebody, well, you can't take it until you have perfect sleep, perfect nutrition, perfect training, and then do it. If it's going to work, then do it. It's fine. I just personally don't believe that, in this case, like branching amino acids are really going to do anything, and the evidence is pretty clear on that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess we shouldn't gatekeep about paying $10 for some creatine HCl.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, I mean, I don't think people have to be perfect in every regard as long as they understand. A lot of people don't, right? A lot of people, as long as they understand that, hey, this is not going to make as big of a difference. Like you're that 16-year-old who's ready to drop $100 at GNC, maybe consider just getting an extra hour of sleep, right? For you, that's probably going to be a bigger deal.
Yeah. Man, I've been that 16-year-old. Well, actually, I guess I was a 19-year-old. That's when I
Yeah.
started. But
Okay.
the animal pack and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
mass gainer, where it's like, man, I could have just bought some table sugar from Walmart and some maltodextrin and
Right.
instead of pay forking out all that extra money for the mass gainer.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so this is a two-parter for you. What was the most in or has been the most enjoyable period in your training history? Not necessarily the most productive, but the time where you just were the most in love with how you were approaching your training.
Okay. Do you want me to get to that before the second part of the question?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So it's a good question. Unfortunately, a large portion of my training career was plagued by never feeling like I was progressing enough. And so, like in high school, I mean, really the first 2 years, I probably put on 20 pounds of muscle. And I started very underweight, I was like 130 pounds. So actually, my after my freshman year, I was 130. And by the end of my sophomore year, I was 165. So maybe 160. But either way, plenty of that was lean body mass. But I still, I was tall and lanky. And so it was never like, oh, I feel accomplished. It was like normal now. And so that was unfortunately, it was just like never enough, never enough. In general, training in probably college and dental school was the most fun because that was where I was around a lot of friends who were lifting and we were all kind of growing together. And I made substantial progress. I mean, I probably put on probably about another 15 to 20 pounds throughout college of like actual lean body mass, and then dental school, maybe another like 10. And at that point, I could actually see the results, like in the sense that like I was now above average. I wasn't just kind of like quote unquote normal. You're getting the comments from it, and at that age, like that does feel good. And so I think that was probably the most enjoyable, even when things started to slow down, just that camaraderie and everything, which was, going back to the first topic, that was one of the disappointments with the gym setting was after leaving that university setting. And now I'm just kind of in like your regular, in this case, like an LA Fitness, just a completely different environment. And, like you made some of the like interaction very positive there. So now I love the home gym, but I do miss that kind of like brotherly, iron aspect.
Oh man, absolutely. When I guess it would be my senior year of college, I moved into this house with three of my friends, and we had a squat rack in the living room. And the plates, we didn't have a weight tree, so we just like tried to gently rest the plates on the hardwood floor that was all
Okay.
so just scarred up.
Yeah, yeah.
We had some like the Olympic adjustable dumbbells that you just like screw the plates
Yeah,
onto.
yeah.
That was really fun. We had a bent bar. The rack was super wobbly, but it had like a chin up on it. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, just being able to hang out there, especially in your house, with three other guys who are lifting,
Yeah, definitely.
you lose out on some of that once you enter grown up world and grown up schedule.
Right. Yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I train at 4 a.m. right now just because of my
Oh,
work
wow.
situation, and so I'm opening up that gym by myself. I just put on like this is really cheesy, but I put on like this samurai meditation music.
Oh, really?
It's really peaceful, but it's just me and the samurai meditation music. So it's a different vibe. And I really enjoy my training, but
Yeah.
you do sometimes miss, getting to talk shit with people and stuff.
Yeah, like I still try to do. I mean, I think probably some of my friends think I'm crazy, but like when I hang out with probably half of my friends, like there's a workout involved.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily because we have to do it. Like, one of my buddies is a very productive dentist as well. And he, when we hang out, it's not like a task. It's just like, well, this is what we're going to do. Like, we're just going to go do this thing. Um, and I'm trying to like if I go on a cruise, I probably work out every day there just because it's something I enjoy. So it is nice when you can still kind of live that again.
Yeah. What is the best gym that I'm pausing part two of this question.
Okay. All right.
What is the best cruise ship gym? Like what's the cruise line and what was the equipment that made it better than normal?
So yeah, I mean, I could talk about cruises for a while. My brother said I should get like Royal Caribbean to sponsor me. I think part of it is like fighting back against because I've seen a lot of people talk poorly on cruises, and I love them. And so it's I don't know if you saw he's kind of newer in the space, Varun, Indian
Yeah.
guy. Yeah. So he was saying he's like, oh, I hate cruises, but he loves all inclusives. And I was like, okay, let's like talk about this because if you love an all inclusive, a cruise is an all inclusive on the water. So like, what specifically, and it was just friendly conversation, but the point just being that I do quite enjoy them, and uh, I've mostly done Royal Caribbean. I've done Princess. I've done Carnival. The larger ships are nice in that like you can work out and you're literally just like looking out over the ocean, which is just really beautiful. So I always like to get up, work out, and then I'll just go to the breakfast buffet and just pig out. But I can't say like the gyms have been dramatically different. But again, I'm usually on a larger ship, probably is if you're on a smaller ship. But it's not like I think they usually have life fitness brands, and that equipment is usually pretty good. But it's again, it's less so like this is a top tier gym and more so just the general environment.
Two thoughts. First of all, ideal situation for a cruise is you're bulking, and maybe you're bulking a little recklessly or a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
recklessly. And so I'm not sure whether you want to do an Alaskan cruise because it's cooler, so it's easier to stuff yourself and
right,
cover. Your MRV for overfeeding is higher when it's cooler weather.
right,
Maybe you just want to cap the hedonism a little bit because you're going to overeat anyway. I mean, it's a cruise buffet, right? But if you go to somewhere where you're sweating between the bouts of feeding, then like maybe that puts a cap on like your caloric surplus a little bit. That's more reasonable. So you don't come out of that week like
right.
10 pounds and you have to do a cleanup cut, right?
Yeah, so I've never done an Alaskan cruise. It is on the list. They've pretty much all been to the Bahamas, Caribbean, other than one European. I haven't noticed any issue temperature wise, but I will say I don't advise people necessarily diet for a cruise depending on your, willpower and appetite and whatnot. Because these days my appetite is not what it used to be at all. And the last couple of cruises I've gone on, I've gained like 5 pounds, and within like a couple of days it's off. Like obviously there's a lot of water weight and whatnot. But 2011 and 13, I dieted hard for those cruises and I had a huge appetite. And I'm not exaggerating. They were a 7 and a 5 day cruise. Each day was between 6 to 8 or more thousand calories per day. And I literally gained 10 to 20 pounds of body weight. And it was just like thinking back, it was just dumb. And I was like so hungry. And like that was the first few times I'd gotten really lean for me at least. And the food was like great and everything, but even then, by like the third day, because like I mean, there's quite literally an unlimited amount of food, and there's a huge variety, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that increased variety leads to eating more because you want to try everything. And I mean, you literally could not, if you were to try just one portion of every different food on a cruise that's available, I mean, you'd have like months of food. I mean, there's just too much. And so I was just constantly stuffing my face. So I wouldn't do that again. Now, if I go on a cruise, you're probably looking at between 3,500 to even, some days could be still like 5,000 calories, but you're more active and moving around and gain a little bit of fat, but nothing crazy.
Man, that this just hits a little too close for to home for me right now
Yeah.
because in March, and I'm more in the strength training is kind of my passion, like pushing up the big three plus OHP. But I certainly want to not just be a total lard ass in the interests of my fiance's happiness. But
Right.
in March, I was 214. And a month ago, I was 177. So I did a hard cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it was rough. And so, I mean, it was kind of, in retrospect, it was kind of like doing a contest prep. Not that I got contest lean, but just that I
Yeah, sure.
much weight. And obviously, that 177.4 was like a low weigh in the morning, totally depleted of glycogen. I was probably more like an honest 180.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
routine was like I weighed myself midday. And so maybe we say 210 to 180, so 30
yeah.
pounds. But pretty brutal. And I don't think I realized how brutal it was until I decided to end the diet. And I was still on my meal plan. I was just like, bring it up to maintenance, man, kind of get a baseline and then just add a couple hundred calories. We're going to gain pound or two a month. And that quickly went out the window. I just started eating Willow's leftovers, and I've rebounded a little harder than I planned to, but I've settled out here. So
What do you weigh now?
I was like 188.
Okay.
This, I've had a high weigh-in of like 190, but I mean, I stopped dieting maybe 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's not bad.
I guess, yeah, because maybe we say 5 pounds of that is glycogen, or whatever, water,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
intake. So maybe I feel better about that. But I certainly my face has gotten a lot puffier.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. The face, it's funny though, as you get older, like when I was bulked up at 22. I don't know, I just retain more water and I still retain a lot of water. But I mean, man, like there's a specific video I remember seeing, and I was probably 195 at the time, and my face just looked so fat. It was just crazy. And now, like the last time I was even up to 205 to 210, it's like I'm clearly softer, but my face was holding it pretty well.
But then that begs the disconcerting question of where else does that go? Because the
Sure.
weight, right? So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I've actually noticed, and I don't know if your distribution of body fat really changes, but I do feel like I have a tendency to store more fat on my lower back than I used to. I'm 31, so I'm
Yeah,
speaking in my 20s. And man, in my 20s, when I dieted, I just had like an iron grip on my will. Like I never deviated. I just stayed on my meal plan. Bulk, it's like a steady 200 surplus. Like I'm
yeah,
way, and there I had no issues with that. And maybe now I just don't care as much about like the body composition side of it.
sure.
But the last few diets I've done, I just come out of it harder than you know
Yeah.
I plan to, and I always just go, I don't care enough to really strain it, to really tighten down and extend this surplus. But
Yeah, I do think there's generally less motivation as you're older because it becomes mostly intrinsic, whereas for most of us, there is an extrinsic factor when you're in high school and college. I mean, even if you're doing it for yourself, you often do want to look good for the opposite sex, and you do there is that egotistical aspect of it that's there. And if you're kind of settled in and you're married or whatever your situation is, it's just I think harder to care. I mean, there's a reason that when people get divorced, they oftentimes start going to the gym, right? I mean, I've had plenty of patients who it's like, hey, I'm going to get veneers because I'm back on the dating scene, right? And so I would hate to give into the mindset of like, well, if you're settled, just kind of let yourself go. Of course, I would disagree with that. But I do like there is a rationale to people who say, hey, I don't care as much. And it becomes more about what you care for yourself rather than, again, like external.
yeah, and there's a big difference between like I think for both of us, not caring is like we're 18% body fat,
Right. Right.
and it's like that we're not uh within the realm of like obesity or something, or the
Yeah.
realm.
Yeah. Yeah, if anything, and I've commented on this before, if anything, me not caring is part of why I'm actually currently dieting because
Hmm.
I get way more compliments when I'm at a higher body fat just because I fill out the clothes more. I mean, right now I've cut about almost 20 pounds in the last like 6 months. And most of the comments are, oh, you're looking thin. Like, where'd your butt go? Like things like that. Right. So
Yeah.
it is actually significantly harder if you were to care about from an ego standpoint. I don't really care at this point. So.
Yeah, that is a good point. You look better to everybody who isn't your significant other, probably whenever you're relatively bulked up.
Yeah, you look more impressive for sure. I mean, like when I'm 215, 220, I mean, I'm not like this Hulk or anything at all, but I do look like a guy who lifts. And if I'm 185, it's like, yeah, like you have abs and everything, and that's cool. But outside of that scenario, it's just kind of like a thin guy.
Yeah, and it's just it's not fun being flat all the time when you're dieting, especially if you've
Sure.
been 6 month phase. It's like there's a point where like you can't get around having like relatively low glycogen on hand.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're just gonna flatten out and you'll
Yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot, I mean, it really, like, for example, like I've lost almost no strength during this diet. Now, part of that is probably because of the home gym. So I talk frequently about neurological adaptation, and I do believe that neurological adaptation occurs longer than some people say. Like some people are like, oh, if it's a curl, you should just master it right away. And I have consistently found that just for me, if it's a new exercise, there will be weeks where I quote unquote progress, but it's not true strength gains. But anyway, so I'm doing all these home workouts, and so that could be part of why I haven't seen any strength loss. But I mean, I quite literally have not seen any, and I'm down, like I said, almost 20 pounds. But of course, fat fills you out too, and fat makes your arms bigger and your legs bigger and your butt bigger and all that. And so, even if you have the most successful diet ever, you're still to the average person just going to look like a smaller individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you are maintaining strength in the things that are relevant for hypertrophy. Like an
Correct.
isolation movement, if you hold on to your strength there, that probably is a better barometer of maintaining muscle mass than if you lose progress, if you lose some poundage on the bench or the squat, where so much of that is based on uh
Leverages and
ocean. Yeah, and your leverages, the fat cushions you some, especially
absolutely.
squat. But yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, dieting I think that part of why I'm less motivated to maintain that leanness coming out of the diet is also because I lose strength in the things that I care about, right? And so it's like
Mhm.
because I lost quite a bit of strength over that period of time where I did my cut. And it just, I mean, how it gets, like your sleep is bad and that's part of it, but um it's just not motivating to me. Like that's what I'm in the gym for ultimately is like that strength progression. And so to kind of lose sight of that, it would almost be like if you had sort of more of a hypertrophy oriented mindset or like aesthetics oriented mindset and you were getting smaller. Like you see yourself
Yeah.
getting smaller to diet, but like actually losing contractile tissue or whatever, I guess. But
Yeah, most of my diets when I was younger stopped significantly before I was as lean as I was hoping to get to. And the reason was because I just couldn't handle losing the strength and size. And the size to lose that sucked, but it was like, well, maybe it's fat loss. But the strength was a very clear indicator of, regression. And so I would have a workout and I'd lose a rep and then I'd lose another rep. And like that was just so frustrating to me. I just couldn't deal with it mentally if I were to just keep dieting. Not like I was crying about it. It was just more like, hey, I don't want this to continue. I've worked too hard for this. And that would probably hold true even today if I was losing strength. Like when I was 210, I cut down to about 197. And I just noticed like two exercises, both were triceps. And I just noticed like a 2 rep drop. And I said, all right, I'm not really in a rush for anything. I'm just going to stop dieting until I get that strength back and then I'll continue. And it was kind of weird. Like I said, my appetite seems to have changed quite a bit as I've gotten older. And I'm now like, and I really haven't tried to continue. Now, my strength did end up coming back and is kind of maintained, which is good. But the point being that, like, if I was going in and every workout was losing strength and losing reps and weight, I probably would stop the cut. It's just because it just sucks to lose that.
this actually segues really well into part two of the question that I
Mhm.
alluded to many minutes ago, which is so we talked about the most enjoyable period of your training history. So aside from cruises, what is the most productive period in your training history? What has that been?
Okay. I thought you were going to ask what was the worst time. So, probably
Cover
most
that too.
productive. Yeah. Most productive would have to have been, of course, your first year lifting. So, like my sophomore year of high school, where I went from 130 to 165. But again, I didn't know how good that was at that time, right? Like, I think when you're a beginner, you never really know. And then my freshman and sophomore year of college. And then again, kind of like first year of dental school, because freshman year of college, I netted after like a 25-pound bulk, I netted about 7 pounds at the same waistline. And then sophomore year, I netted about 8 pounds again at the same waistline. So those first 2 years, I mean, I really netted about 15 pounds at the same leanness. And, again, I was still, even after all the gains in high school, I was still very skinny going into college. And then I was finally at like that athletic build level. Um, but that was really great because, like I was getting stronger consistently. I was getting the comments that at that time actually mattered to me. I felt like what I was working towards was actually being achieved. So yeah, that was a pretty good period lifting wise.
Yeah, I was going to actually backtrack and qualify that as like relative to your training age, what was the most productive period? But it sounds like
Yeah.
you already kind of addressed that because like maybe that sophomore, junior, when you're settling into intermediate, was optimal for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, especially I had the unlimited dining plan when I was
Mm.
grad, and man, that helped a lot too. It was like a block from maybe 2 blocks from the rec center to the dining hall and
Yeah.
many
Yeah. Yeah.
things that
Yeah, I did some weird stuff in college, man. Like I think back, like I would like I've mentioned before on the podcast, I would bring a protein shake if I was like going out to a party or something. I would just like chug it real quick. I would the guy I basically had to like make like a good relationship with all the people who served at the dining hall because I
Yep.
remember this one guy specifically was annoyed. I would keep going up for more chicken breasts, but eventually, I would talk to him, and obviously, a lot of times people are just ignoring these people. So if you just talk to them a little bit, they're appreciative of that. And so there's this one guy, Ernie, and he would see me and he would just give me like 4 chicken breasts because he just knew I was asking for it. And there was this woman who would make omelets and she would see me like 4 or 5 people behind the line. And she would see me and she'd start making my omelet ahead of time so I could just go up and get it. So I formed some good relationships there. Another woman at the salad bar, I was always getting the cottage cheese from there. So it was just, I was like kind of known for that. But I would just bring this stuff like back to my dorm and just eat. You didn't even have, I don't even think our dorm had, maybe we must have had a microwave, I guess. But other than that, just eating like random chicken breasts. So you just kind of had to make it work. And I think about some of that stuff. I was like, man, I would not want to do any of that right now. Like the way you just kind of had to do it. But I made it work then and it was good.
It's weird how sometimes you don't think twice about that when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
What I did, bro, I was like, how did I get myself in the mindset to live off of canned tuna when I was cutting in Peru when I lived in Peru?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I probably gave myself mercury poisoning.
Yeah.
But it's funny about the dining hall staff because I mean I still remember people. Miss Pam, right? And she was the chicken lady at Lenore Dining Hall, so she would load me up, And she's a little skeptical at first that I was eating that much chicken because I mean I went about this really poorly in college. I thought I only needed to eat protein because if I just ate protein, I wouldn't gain any fat. I just gained,
Right.
in spite of what the mirror was showing me was happening. You know,
Yeah.
like I didn't understand like I guess the fat content in some of the protein I was eating because like the chicken was greased up even if you pulled off the skin. And so
Yeah.
anyway,
Right.
way too much rotisserie chicken.
Yeah.
But Miss Pam would hook me up. And there's this other lady who would do the hash browns because sometimes I'd do the hash post workout because that was my post workout carb window. And she just had this gravelly voice, and every single person who came up to her, she was like, "How may I help you?" And it's like it was like shocking that she would ask that because everybody wants the hash browns. But she was really nice. I started talking to her, and she kind of came out of her shell. But anyway,
Right, right. That's funny. Yeah, I was eating 2 grams per pound of protein at that time. So I was, 320, 330 grams of protein. And the calories were only maybe 3,000. I mean, they weren't that high. So I was eating, 50+% protein.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a good way to diet if you have trouble with appetite issues. I mean, it's not that it's optimal to lower your carbs, but up in the protein helps satiety. But I wouldn't do it to bulk.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we covered most productive period of your training history. Uh, Maybe this will be our wrap up question. Of all of the guests that you've had in the hallowed history of Brains and Gains podcast, who has what single conversation has inspired you to make changes to your own training, or like make the most changes to your training from one conversation?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that. Because for sure, I have certain guests on who I clearly really enjoy talking to. Like I can think of certain podcasts themselves that maybe were my favorite because of the people. Like when I had Eric Helms and Scott Stevenson on together, that was a really great one for me because they're two guys I look up to in the industry and I respect. And actually, when I started the podcast myself, a couple months prior to that, I had asked Steve Hall, I said, "Hey, what do you think about getting these two on?" He's like, "Oh, okay, we'll consider it." And then that's kind of what made me think, well, why don't I just do it? And then reached out to them and they kind of, were early guests of mine. And so, like that was a great one. And all the ones with Eric and Scott and, all the guys that I've had on repeatedly, I really enjoy. But I don't know if there's one where I walked away and I was like, this is going to change things so much because generally, if they're coming on the podcast, I know their content. And so I kind of know, and they're more conversational than they are just a Q&A. So I will say when I had Stu McGill on for the back stuff, I was surprised by some of his recommendations, like basically almost like not loading the spine at all, and some other things with that. So that at least made me reconsider some things, even if I didn't necessarily fully agree with it, or it wasn't what I had heard from other people I respect in the industry. So that was something where I was like, oh, like I actually did not expect you to say that. Um, that would stand out, but I can't think too much of where I've had somebody on and been like, well, this is dramatically going to alter my training.
That makes sense because yeah, you only bring on people who you're very aware of. And I knew Pete Rubish wasn't going to convince you to do ultra marathons.
Yeah, yeah, or no, definitely not.
Seems like you have a very negative relationship with your running
Yeah,
history.
well, I've actually run twice in the last week, and I will be doing more cardio, just for health reasons. I've kind of decided because I don't get a lot of steps in. You might have heard me talk about this. And so I do think that if somebody is really active, like Eric Helms and I were talking about this, he's getting 9,000 steps a day. He's doing 5 high volume workouts a week or 6 or whatever it is. Does somebody like that, who's also like 10 to 11% body fat, does somebody like that benefit a lot from adding more cardio? Maybe not. But, if I'm averaging 4 or 5,000 steps a day and I'm doing, two short cardio sessions, is that optimizing, quote unquote, the benefit I could get? Probably not. And so I actually will be doing some more, but nothing that's like marathons or anything like that. These are like 20 to 40 minute moderate intensity cardio sessions for health.
But you're exclusively running for those?
No, I'd actually probably just run maybe like once a week. It's nice to get outside. I'd like to get a bike. I have like a stationary bike, but I'd like to get one, outside. But I would prefer lower impact. So if we end up getting the arc or an elliptical, doing that. And again, like the stationary bike has been fantastic. That would be my general preference.
I just got this walk pad off of Amazon. It's an incline walk pad. No like upper carriage. So it's really portable. I just flip it up and store it by our hutch. But I've been using that for my cardio because I find running and even cycling to some extent have a negative impact on my squatting and deadlifting. And I'm
Mm,
sure I condition myself better, but every time I throw it in, it definitely I take a hit. But the incline walking, it gets my heart rate where I want it to be. And I just don't have that like lingering heaviness in my legs afterwards. So I watch an episode of Vikings that's like
okay.
5 minutes, and that's the only time I get to watch Vikings is that 45-minute cardio session. I just do
What do you get your heart rate up to on that?
I'm not actually tracking my heart rate, but I the proxy I use is like nose breathing. And if I get to the point where I feel like I have to focus to just nose breathe, generally to me that would fall in like solid zone 2 cardio.
Okay.
I do have my background is actually endurance sports. And I mean, 3 years ago, I was doing Ironmans.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I took a break. I grew up doing cross country and triathlons, started lifting, stopped lifting around the pandemic for reasons that you could probably guess, and then got back into triathlons. But I have a
Yeah.
long history of that. So I mean, I should just buy a heart rate monitor and slap it on, but I feel confident and it definitely is faster than I walk on a trail. Because I used to go outside and do it, but
Okay.
I don't think that I'm achieving that steady state heart rate that like the walk pad is giving me. And the
Right.
incline helps. I put it on like 4 miles per hour and the highest incline, which it says it's 6%, but I don't believe it's 6% because 6% I think feels pretty steep. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's as high as that goes, and so it's like standardized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, incline walking can be great. I mean, I used to do I think for me, one of the reasons I dislike cardio is it's just hard for me to focus on anything. So like, but I've tried like when I was in high school and I had a treadmill, I would like try to read. That always sucked because I was like not able to focus on what I was reading. The the best way to pass that time, my brother and I would play Super Smash Bros. And I would just hold the controller. And man, like a half an hour, felt like 2 minutes. Like, I could just
Wow.
play that forever. So that was great. Movies were okay too. But yeah, like if I could actually play a video game like that, that was awesome.
Uh, who's your go-to character? Don't say Mr. Game and Watch.
Well, it depends on what version we're talking about.
I don't know enough to go.
Yeah, so for the N64 version, it would be Pikachu. For Melee, it would be Falco. And then for Brawl, it was also Falco. And then for Smash 4, it was Ryu.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I
Yeah,
wish
yeah.
I could offer more substantive feedback on that, but I honestly don't know enough.
Yeah, I'm not like a big gamer or anything. I never had an Xbox. I never got like that much into it. It was pretty much just like Super Smash Bros. Was kind of like growing up the thing, and that was about it.
And you haven't taken any of this into your adult life?
I mean, we have a system, but I don't know the last time we booted it up. If it was like we were at Ocean City last year, and my sister's boyfriend brought it, so we played, and that was great. He's just on vacation, but I just can't get myself to. It just seems like such a waste of time, and I'm all for like quality time and everything, like maybe we'll watch a movie together or something. But to me, to just like sit down and be by myself and play a video game for hours, I can't even come close to justifying that use of time.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I've watched my free time drastically shrink, strangely enough, since I left grad school.
Yeah,
Usually it should be the opposite, but for me, yeah, and that's just not that it was in my budget before, but it certainly wouldn't be now. So,
right, right, for sure.
well, hey, I really appreciate you making the time to come on. I know we had to reschedule a
Yeah,
couple times, but yeah.
cool, man. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.